So making monsters is like the follow-up. Now, what I was wondering with it is that it is a very different book from Masters of Makeup Effects.
Mhm.
Why not do a Masters of Makeup Effects 2? Because there's so many more stories within that. I know genre is probably not the right word, but you know what I
No,
mean.
no, definitely. No, that's a good question. For one thing, Howard wasn't terribly interested in just doing the same thing over again. We love the format that we came up with. Everyone was like, "Well, I don't know why so many other books aren't written this way." You know,
Yeah.
the cutting through the cutting through the chat, cutting through so much of so much extraneous, forgettable detail before you get to the really fun bits. You know,
Mm.
the same with Masters of Makeup Effects. What we wanted to do is we wanted to create a fun, chatty, conversational book in which, like, if you'd had dinner with a few of these movie making legends the next day, you probably wouldn't remember everything you talked about, but maybe you take away three or four like really great stories that you could then relay
Yeah.
later. So I just wanted this book. We just wanted this book to be that, to just be like all the best stuff and just cut out everything else. That's why we interviewed 80 people. We had 160 odd hours of interview material. And really, I actually only used a fraction of that. And it was all interesting. It was all, I just wanted the butter, you know. I just wanted the diamonds out of those mines because the
That's
stuff
fair
that
enough.
like on the most. So we didn't want to do exactly the same thing, but we love the format. We really adore the format. So it's like, and obviously our publishers, Welbeck, they love the format too. In fact, you know, our editor Ross said to us, you know, marketing. Marketing said they were really surprised at how well your book did. Like, it was like, what are you talking about? It's like, you know, there's such a backhanded compliment.
Yes.
But of course, you know, I mean, really, it's like, well, thank you. I got to say now that it's Welbeck's sort of changed hands and it's different marketing, so we have high hopes
So
this time around. But the point is that we wanted to do the same format, but we didn't want to just do makeup effects. We wanted to, you know, we met so many people who loved the first book, and they were all monster kids. You know, that seemed to be like the primary audience. So and because we love monsters, and Howard's a monster kid, and I grew up obsessed with monsters and robots, and you know, aliens, and we thought, well, let's just make it monsters. Let's just do 100% monsters because then we don't just have to do makeup artists and other people talking about makeup artists. We can talk about the art of creating monsters and monster movies from the point of view not only of makeup artists but visual effects artists. So we could include things like Jurassic Park and the CG dinosaurs, which isn't something we could do in a makeup effects book. We could talk to people like Ty West, who directed X and Pearl, and we could speak to Damien Leone, who made the Terrifier movies, and we could speak to them not just about the makeup, but we could talk to them about what does it take to create a monster, to direct a monster movie. You know, what are the elements that make a monster movie great? We spoke to composers like Michael Giacchino. We spoke to you know, any number of people, artists and actors, and we just wanted to know from everyone's different perspective who they admired, what monsters they loved, what filmmakers they were most impressed by and that made the biggest impression on them growing up. But you know, what does it take to make a classic monster and a brilliant monster movie? And it was like once we had that sort of idea, then it all sort of all came together, basically.
having read the book, the first thing that comes across to me, which is I didn't really expect to be honest, was the number of stories that have come out of a father-son bond, sharing their love, and the fathers telling these what are legends of the industry now, and that kind of quite struck me. Was it the same for yourself?
It's same for myself in terms
In,
of
in terms of when you were
when we
out
were putting
talking
the
to
book
them, that
together.
you didn't expect that to come out with the interviews with them.
Well, I know I know Howard very well, and I know, and I think that monster kids are emotional folks. We are, and we're very in touch with our feelings. You know, people look at monster kids, and they, you know, with their piercings and their tattoos and their black monster t-shirts, and they think they were sort of unapproachable people. But the opposite seems to be the case, that as I understand it, and most of the people who we interviewed, they were encouraged by their parents. Um, Not everyone. You know, we had some stories. We interviewed David Dasmachian, and he had to hide his love of horror and monsters like very carefully. Like his parents would not have approved. We spoke to people whose parents were sort of like against that sort of stuff on religious grounds, who would snatch 20 minutes of watching a movie, you know, over a few weeks, while their parents were out. And but for the most part, it seemed to be that the cool parents that created the cool kids were the ones who were like encouraged them and got behind them, and supported them and enjoyed the films with them, and how it became a tremendous bonding experience. I mean, for my part, I didn't only grow up a monster kid, but my mum and we shared a love of movies, and she imparted that to me. So it does help to have somebody in your formative years going, you know, I see you, and I get it. And we had Dirk Rogers. He works for Howard at KMB, and also he's a creature performer. He's the one who proposed to his wife at Toho Studios, and he's the one who sat in when they moved to a house. The only place they could get reception on their rabbit ears TV was in a cupboard in his room, and they're sitting there watching a Godzilla movie. He's sitting on his dad's lap as a little boy, watching Godzilla, and every time a monster comes on screen, his dad's sort of jumping and making, you know, scaring him, and they're laughing and bonding over it. And just to talk to him, it was so emotional. It was such a meaningful memory for him, and such a formative moment that, yeah, I mean, I'm really glad that we were able to capture that, and people were very open and honest about it. And it was, yeah, I mean, you wouldn't think in a book about monsters that it would become, in part, a celebration of parental bonding, but you know, surprise, that's what it sort of became in some way, yeah.
There's quite a lot of for me, really surprising stories, some like bombshell revelations in there for me. And the
Oh,
first,
really?
yeah, yeah. And the first one is the John Carpenter saying that he doesn't like directing.
Yes, he got into it for girls. So, so yeah, John Carpenter is. We didn't speak to him for the first book. Howard knows him pretty well. Howard's worked with him on several occasions, and Howard's always said that he wouldn't be the right person to talk to for masters and makeup effects, because he always regards makeup as just that rubbery monster shit. That being a direct quote.
Thanks, John.
So, you know, as far as John Carpenter is concerned, it was Dean Cundy, the cinematographer, that was, you know, kind of largely responsible in how he shot those effects. Robertine's incredible effects, Robertine, his team's incredible effects. So, but you know, he obviously appreciates it, but he doesn't, you know, he's not necessarily the sort of person who would enthuse about it. I think from the few times that I've met him, and from stories about him, that he's sort of mellowing as he gets older, and I think that he was in very good form when we spoke to him. And you know, John Carpenter is just an absolute legend. I mean, that is a really easy word to bandy around when you're doing a book like this, because we spoke to so many incredible people that I kept having to sort of like nudge the little 10-year-old me inside and say, can you believe we're talking to John Carpenter or Joe Dante or Rick Baker or Phil Tippett? I mean, it's like, I'm just like freaking out, man, when we're speaking to these people. But yeah, John Carpenter was John Carpenter was tremendously entertaining, but yeah, he's not a big fan of that rubbery monster shit. But when we talk to him, we're talking to him about, I want to talk to him about music because, I mean, as far as I'm concerned, like the Halloween theme is as iconic as the
Iconic, yeah.
Jaws theme. I mean, it's
Yeah.
like one of those, great, do 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 do. So John Carpenter did that for me. I'm talking to him about it, and he does that like he does a virtual keyboard for me, and he does those famous bars of the Halloween theme.
Yeah.
And I'm sitting there, and my eyes go wide, and I thought, first thing I do when we finish doing this interview is I'm going to clip that soundbite, and I'm going to turn it into my ringtone. And literally, and it was complicated because iPhones, they're not very friendly about making your own ringtone. But I spent like half a day figuring it out. And now, every time I get a text, a message, or anything, I've got John Carpenter on my phone going, duh, 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 duh. Every time it makes my wife jump out of her skin. It's like, what? She never gets used to
Change
it.
change that ringtone. You mentioned Joe Dante because that was the other one I was that quite surprised me. More in terms of the shade that he throws at American Werewolf, and I kind of thought, oh, now I wasn't expecting that. And then it was the transformation. He was, I think the words he uses are that the scene is overlit. It's shot at unexpected angles by John Landis.
Yes.
Did that take you back a bit?
Well, we for the first book, we did a lot about American Werewolf in London. We interviewed John Landis and we interviewed Rick Baker, and we put those interviews together to get a kind of a great sort of a full story of the creation of those effects and the movie itself. For this one, we wanted to do the same for The Howling.
Mm,
Um, and so we had to speak to Joe Dante. We had to get into it. Obviously, we wanted to speak to Robertine as well, but Robertine is the Bigfoot of the industry, and he is just impossible. We really, really tried. It was like we knew that everyone would want it, and we desperately wanted it, but it's like the guy will not. He just will not answer messages. He will not respond. He was just, and look, that's what he wants, then fine. You hear stories about meeting him in the wild, and apparently he's super friendly and chatty, but it's like not in a more, kind of organized way. So Howard has this idea because obviously the Howling and American Werewolf in London came out the same year. There was a little competition because Rick Baker was originally going to do The Howling, but quit that to do American Werewolf because he and John Carpenter have been talking about doing American Werewolf since they were like teenagers. And Rick's protege Robertine goes off and does The Howling. They were very connected, and I think when there's some shade thrown, I think both filmmakers respect the other's work, but there's also a little bit of friendly competition.
yeah,
You know?
yeah,
I mean, even Rick Baker says that he would have preferred his werewolf to be bipedal, standing up on two legs instead of down on all fours the way it was, but the way that John Carpenter wanted. So it's like all these guys, they're getting a little old now and they just don't give a shit. Now
yes.
is the time when they're
Age does
basically,
that to you,
it's
doesn't it?
like they retired. So it's like, what do they give it? Well, they don't fucking care if they're going to say something and something will be taken a bit funnily but I think they're all friends.
Yeah.
And, but yeah, no, he definitely, well, it was a bold choice of John Landis's to shoot it in bright light. I mean, that was the point, though. That was what he
Yeah.
wanted to do. He didn't want to do the classic sort of falling behind the sofa, getting up, and then you
Yeah.
see the hand as a paw, or the one like from the Wolfman where he's sitting in the chair, sitting incredibly still while Jack Pierce built up layers and layers of makeup and did it like that. He wanted it to be like in your face, man. If he
Yeah.
could have, he would have done it all in one shot, but obviously the effects at the time didn't allow it.
Well, you mentioned Rick Baker, and obviously he really is a legend, Rick
He
Baker. I think
is.
even people in the industry regard him as, this uber legend, and it's such a shame that he's retired effectively from films. But what I liked about it is there's so many stories from Rick Baker in this, and the one that I particularly found interesting was the one about the making of Kong,
Oh yeah,
1976
I
version
knew
King
you were going to
Kong.
say that. I was so excited to get that. So excited. Sorry, go on, go on.
Well, because I'd written a big feature about the making of that film, like a really
Yeah.
big feature, but it's the stories of the. I'm not sure if animosity is the right word between Rick Baker getting involved and Carlo Rambaldi.
Oh yeah, I think
Um,
animosity is actually quite is maybe not strong enough. But yeah, definitely. Yeah,
is
yeah.
that?
And Dino De Laurentiis, the
Yeah,
producer. I mean, Rick is not a guy who necessarily suffers fools gladly. He knows his worth, and he's not quiet about disagreeing with people. He's like, well, if you don't like what I do, you hired me to do this job. If you don't like what I'm doing, then just fire me. And I think from the very beginning of the process, they treated him very disrespectfully.
mm,
He told them, if you don't hire me by that date, I need to work on this other film. And then they just left it. Then they finally get in touch with him after the date, and he's like, "Well, now what am I supposed to do?" And then they bring in Carlo Rabaldi, who's a completely different sort of effects guy, and there's a huge language barrier between them. He just didn't know how that could possibly work with, how they could possibly work together on creating one thing when they're on two different continents. And as it turned out, they really couldn't work together.
yeah,
And Dino, who was, definitely on Colorado Baldy's side, didn't treat Rick well and gave him grief all the way through the process. And Rick doesn't even get a credit for playing King Kong in
mm,
the film. I mean, he did so much. He did so much. He built the suit. He played Kong. He doesn't necessarily think that it's a good film, but
mm.
he does see the. He did say it was really fun stomping around miniature sets and destroying buildings and fighting planes and stuff. But yeah, I was. It's not a book of dirt. It's not sort of gossipy or. We didn't want to do anything like that. Everybody got a chance to approve their quotes.
Mm.
But there are some legendary stories of kind of Hollywood battles, and to have that, to really capture that, to have straight from the horse's mouth, to have Rick telling us about that, I felt like it was quite a privilege hearing
Yeah.
hearing hearing his war stories. Amazing.
There's quite a lot with Richard Edlund, who's another legend, and there's a bit where he talks about Phil Tippett on Jurassic Park and how I think the phrase he uses is that he bested Ray Harryhausen's, and he uses the word somewhat, I think he uses the word sad about Ray Harryhausen with regard to that. You
Mhm.
know Harryhausen, you've met him,
I interviewed him, yeah, a few
yeah,
times. Yes.
what's your recollection of Ray Harryhausen?
Well, we actually, because obviously he was not a makeup artist, we weren't able to really do more than mention him here and there in the last book. In the new book, we have a whole chapter about him because everybody loves Ray Harryhausen. Everybody, he's part of everyone's formative years, and I absolutely adore Ray. I mean, as a person, as a filmmaker, as an artist. I mean, he was incredibly important to me growing up. He was the first filmmaker I was aware of. He was the first filmmaker that was like, oh, that's a Ray Harryhausen film. I want to go and see that, before I really cared about individual actors or directors. And so what we've basically got is a chapter that is an outpouring of love of Ray, of stories of meeting him. We've got a wonderful interview with Caroline Munro, who worked with Ray and adored Ray, as did everybody who met him. And so I think that we've got a great tribute to him. He knew, though, that when Jurassic Park came out, that he was extinct, that
Yeah,
that was his time was done. But to be honest, he'd retired 10 years before then.
yeah.
And I think that now that the dust has settled, we see that there's room for both computer generated effects and makeup effects, and it's better actually when they work together.
Mm, yeah.
But nothing that has come, nothing that's come post Ray takes away from what he gave. the world. You know, I think his films remain beautiful, thrilling, entertaining, emotional, like works of art. And you know, a classic is a classic. It doesn't matter how many Jurassic Parks there are. It doesn't mean that Jason and the Argonauts doesn't absolutely kick ass.
Yeah. There, I mean, Ray, as you say, is unfortunately no longer with us. There are quite a few artists in the book who are no longer with us. And I'm guessing, like both of us, we've got archive interviews over the years. When you were going through your archive interviews, was there stuff which you'd forgotten about or just completely surprised you?
Well, obviously, I used some stuff about I used a bit of interview with Richard Keel because we wanted to do things on human monsters, so we were able to get in. He's talking about playing Jaws in the Bond movies. I included some stuff with Wes Craven interview that I did with him. It just seemed like they weren't around to speak on their behalf, but I'd spoken to them in the past. It seemed perfectly legitimate to include their stuff. No, I can't say that anything surprised me because I've looked back on those interviews over the years and kind of I was really happy to have an opportunity, George Romero too, to have an opportunity to include them in this book because it feels like a family scrapbook in a way, you know, for monster kids of the many, many parents who raised them, the many monster filmmakers who raised them, and how could you have Joe Dante and John Landis and John Carpenter without including Wes Craven and George Romero. You know, you just couldn't.
So then finally, the first book was, excusing the pun, a monstrous success. This second one is almost bound to go the same way. There's so much in it. It's just this beautiful coffee table book. But
Thank you.
what's next?
Well, next I get to enjoy the kind of fruits of my labors and get to go back to LA for signings. We've got signings in London towards the end of the year, but also you know some more things happening in January 2026 in London. Uh, as for the next project, I don't know. Maybe Howard and I will be doing something, and maybe it won't be a book. I mean, I can't really say. We
But
don't
see,
have plans to do another book as yet. You know, it takes 2 years to put these things together,
yeah,
and you need to have a rest, and you need to let the dust settle before you kind of before we sort of. It's such a huge commitment. You know, I mean, basically, if I kind of if we agree to doing another book, that's another 2 years in my pajamas, sat at my computer, which isn't, you know, it's not a terrible way to live. But I don't know. I feel like I might want to get out in the world a little bit more.
Howard's got he's got such a phenomenal and impressive pedigree. He's a book in himself, surely.
Yes, yes, and also his studio K and B. But but let's wait and see. I don't know if Howard would ever really want a book written just about himself. Howard likes to um, share the attention and give credit where credit's due. And it's far more Howard's speed to want to do a book like Masters of Makeup Effects or Making Monsters, which basically says, yeah, I was there, I was part of it, but also, you know, look at this amazing cast of characters that I got to work with and play with and have fun with and create all these incredible stories with. And so that's what these books are. They're scrapbooks. You know, the pictures are all from the people that we contributed with for the most part. You know, we wanted it to feel like a sort of family affair, and I think that maybe that is the secret of why they're so popular because they don't just feel like the standard sort of movie making of stuff. They're just a bit more personal,
Yeah.
and I love that about it. It was such a privilege to be a part to be working on that with Howard, to have that access to hear all those incredible stories. I really, it was very hard work, but worth every second of it.